that I want to be the most progressive district attorney in the state on the issue of medical marijuana, and that is a goal of mine. I also say in a state like Colorado, I don't think that's too tough. But I want to make sure that we use as little of my office's resources in prosecution of marijuana cases as we can. I mean, things that are against the law we will pursue. I want to be practical and helpful to the medical marijuana community where I can in terms of talking about the issues and talking about what I see needs to be done. But I also want to be realistic. I mean, there's a lot of issues here that need to be sorted out. I think it's inevitable that marijuana will be legalized eventually on both the state and the federal basis. My view is we're at a point where the community has a widespread acceptance of the use of marijuana, particularly for medical purposes. I think eventually lawmakers, the Department of Health, other district attorneys will determine that this is a very confusing framework. We need to figure out what to do with it, and we need to move forward. When that happens, I don't know. In the meantime, what's important is that all of us in law enforcement, land use, zoning, that sort of thing, are as fair as we can be and as appropriate as we can be in enforcing the regulations that we have. How do we control where dispensaries are? How do we control what they do? I mean, some of the issues I get calls on all the time are, you know, I had a call a couple of weeks ago. A dispensary wants to put in foosball tables and pool tables in the dispensary. Well, first of all, I have no opinion on that. I mean, there's nothing illegal as far as I can tell about foosball tables and pool tables. But you could argue that a dispensary with a foosball table and a pool table in it maybe isn't just focusing on the medical dispensation of marijuana for medical purposes. It has more of kind of a recreational feel to it. Now, that's the kind of issue in a liquor or alcohol context would be sorted out by the liquor licensing authorities, who would figure out, okay, we're going to give you a license, what can you do, what can't you do? And those are the kinds of things I think eventually will have to be sorted out in connection with the use of marijuana. But let's imagine that somebody wanted to do a grow, an issue which I think is pretty hard to justify legally under the statutes, although I know that some folks see it differently. And it was to occur in a place in which I, as district attorney, was getting a lot of community complaints. It's across from a school, it's near a playground, it's somehow offensive that it's there. I could conceive of a situation in which I would commence a nuisance action, probably paired with a declaratory action, that would seek to have a court determine A, is this legal, which is a big issue at the moment. I think the argument is pretty good that it's not, and B, if it's not legal, ordering that it be abated, that it be stopped. That's about the extent of how I could see getting involved in the land use issues, Will, and hopefully that issue won't arise. We've got plenty of, you know, serious crimes to focus on, and that's where I intend to focus the office. I am sufficiently convinced by the pro-dispensary arguments that I'm not going to prosecute dispensaries absent other illegalities tied to them. But there's a respectable argument that dispensaries are not legal, and it would be prudent for the legislature to come in and to clear that up. The California Court of Appeals just this morning announced a decision that municipal bans on dispensaries are constitutional, that they're legal in California. You know, in that
the ban is legal.
The ban is, in other words, a municipality can say no dispensaries at all, based on, as I understand, I didn't read the opinion because I was getting ready for some things. As I understand it, the basis for their doing that is that it's illegal under federal law, and that's what Broomfield and Superior have done, as I understand it, is they've said, look, we're going to say as a land use matter that you can't do something that's not legal under the laws of the United States, and dispensaries are not legal. Now, I have no idea what the legal basis is for that, the analysis of that, how it all works, but I can understand how a court would reach that conclusion. Part of what's pushing the proliferation of dispensaries, part of it is simply just people wanting to exercise their constitutional rights. They have those constitutional rights. They're important. I've talked to plenty of people who have convinced me that marijuana provides medical benefits that are significant, that can't be obtained elsewhere, and that needs to be available. I have no doubt of that. And part of the enthusiasm about this is simply wanting to protect that. Part of it is there's a whole heck of a lot of money to be made in the medical marijuana dispensary business. And, you know, the Drug Task Force has estimates of how much money certain dispensaries make, and it's a pretty significant amount. And a lot of it's cash, because people don't like to buy their marijuana with a credit card or with a check. And so, part of what's pushing this is there's money to be made, and let's figure out how to do it. Now, and the point is, if there's money to be made, then of course from a government perspective, in an appropriate situation, there's taxes to be collected. And let's figure out how to do that. And I know I talked to some folks in California yesterday whose opinion was that California is going to quickly move towards complete legalization because they see it as a way to help the very serious budget deficit that California faces, which from a government perspective is a completely legitimate thing to do as far as I'm concerned. And it frankly may create the kind of climate of thoughtful, regulated legalization that I think we're eventually headed towards. I don't know if that's going to be in our lifetimes or not, but I think that's where we're headed. We had the aggravated robbery in April of a dispensary that's in the area just east of 28th Street, off of Colorado, just east of the CU campus. And that, that's a pretty messy robbery. I don't know if you followed the situation, but it was weapons, threats, stealing marijuana, everything else. These are the kind of things that people worry about. Right. And I know that the responsible medical marijuana lawyers, and there's a number of them that are taking this very seriously, will advise their clients about keeping the amount of cash on the premises to a minimum. Some will advise their clients to have surveillance cameras on and other kind of security mechanisms there. I think there's a dispute among business people as to how much that kind of I heard that one of the dispensaries on the Hill had installed very expensive bulletproof glass recently. I don't know if that's true or not, but that wouldn't surprise me. There's a lot of dispute among business owners about how much those kinds of measures actually reduce crime or how much they increase crime. And I think the safety concerns I've heard, Cindy, have been about the kind of activity, illegal activity, that this might attract, rather than the fact that somebody might be getting marijuana and walking down the street with it. It has absolutely devastating effects throughout the communities that are impacted, particularly meth, which we could go on and on about that. It's clear that we want to be putting whatever resources we have on the sale and possession of substances into things that are really harming the community, because there's plenty of those.